Today is day 1 of section 4.2, the trigonometric functions on the unit circle. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to let P be the point xy on the unit circle that has arc length t from 1, 0. So we are going to start at 1, 0. This is a unit circle, right? So this is each radius is 1. And we are going to find a point on the circle. This is P, which corresponds to xy. And this corresponds to the angle measure t. So, and t is in radians. Or I guess it could be in degrees. I should say that. So, really quickly, I hope that you can see that this makes a right triangle. So I'm just going to draw the same right triangle out here. So we know we have the 90 degrees there. We know we have angle T here. Okay, but then this distance here is going to be X, and this distance here is going to be Y. So if we go back to right triangle trigonometry, we have SOHCAHTOA, okay, so if we want to find the sine of t, it's going to be equal to our opposite, which is y, over our hypotenuse. But what did we say every radius on the unit circle is? This is 1. So our sine of t is going to be y over 1, or just y. And our cosine of t is going to be equal to our adjacent, which is x, over our hypotenuse, which is 1, and x over 1 simplifies to x. And our tangent of t is going to be our opposite, y, over our adjacent, x. And the important thing here is that x cannot be equal to 0. Okay, and think for a minute. If the denominator, x, was equal to 0, then this would become undefined. Okay, so we can now define 6 trig functions in terms of the unit circle. So this corresponds to my diagram here. If t is a real number and p is a point on the unit circle that corresponds to t, then as we found above, sine of t is equal to y, cosine of t is equal to x, and the tangent of t is equal to y over x, and x cannot be equal to 0. Okay, I am hoping that you also remember from geometry that the tangent is defined as the sine of t over the cosine of t. Okay, so it would also make sense the sine of t is y, the cosine of t is x. I believe that the next 3 functions are going to be new for a lot of you. This is the cosecant. It's abbreviated CSC. This is the secant. It's abbreviated SEC, but read secant. And this is the cotangent. And these are called the reciprocal functions. They're the reciprocal trig functions, I should say. So, if you remember what reciprocal means, right? It means 1 over. So, cosecant is 1 over the sine. That's a definition, okay, something you need to memorize. So this becomes 1 over y. And since y is now in the denominator, it's important that y is not equal to 0. Our secant is the reciprocal of the cosine function, and it's equal to 1 over x, since cosine is our x. And here it's important that x is not equal to 0. Our cotangent is our reciprocal of our tangent, so 1 over our tangent. Okay, the reciprocal of y over x is x over y. And so it's important here that y is not equal to 0. Okay, I also want to show you the cotangent of t is defined where tangent was sine over cosine. The cotangent is defined as cosine over sine. Okay, so these are all different ways to express the cotangent, things that are definitely worth memorizing. Okay, for our next example, I'm sorry, I don't think your point was drawn in, so if you want to pause the video now and draw in your point. Okay, P is negative 3/5, comma, negative 4/5. Negative 3/5 is our x value, negative 4/5 is our y value, as shown on the unit circle below. Determine the 6 trig functions. So you want to find sine of t. Okay, so t is this angle. If we were to draw in an angle in standard form, okay, this would be angle t. So the sine of t is going to be our y coordinate. So our sine of t is negative 4/5. Our cosine of t is going to be our x value, which is negative 3/5. Our tangent of t, I always remember it as sine over cosine. Remember when you're dividing by a fraction, that's taking the numerator fraction when it's a complex fraction like this, and you multiply by the reciprocal of the denominator. Our 5's divide out, and we get 4/3. Okay, next, we need to find the cosecant of t. But the cosecant of t is the reciprocal 1 over y. So I could write out 1 over y, or I could use the fact that reciprocals, our shortcut is to switch our numerator and denominator. Right? Similarly, our secant is the reciprocal function of our cosine. So we want to switch our numerator and our denominator. Our cotangent is the reciprocal of our tangent. So I could do all this work. I could find the cosine over the sine, but I can just look and find the reciprocal. That's 3/4. I've said before that I am not much for memorizing. Okay, so what I do try to do, the way that I remember it is cosine is your x and sine is your y. C comes before s and x comes before y. So cosine and then sine. They're in alphabetical order, the same way that your x and your y are. In terms of memorizing the reciprocal functions, again, this is just how my brain works. I try to remember that every pair has an S and a C. Okay, so sine and cosecant and cosine and secant. Okay, each one has one in the pair that has an S and one in the pair that has a C. I only have to memorize those for the top two because tangent and cotangent are pretty clear to me that those are reciprocals, okay, since they have the same word tangent in them. So I apologize. I think you were missing the point P and the angle measure T. Okay, so this is negative 5/13, 12/13. So if you think about it, it's going to be in the second quadrant because x is negative and y is positive. Whenever you are asked to find the 6 trig functions, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to write out a nice table like this: sine, cosine, tangent, and then their reciprocals, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. Very important that you put in an argument, okay, that you put whatever your angle is. In this case, it's t. So pause the video right now and try this problem on your. Okay, check your answers quickly. If you need to pause right now, that's fine. Okay, but make sure you get the same answers as me before we move on. So next, we want to find this figure, which I should have said is a unit circle. That's important. Okay, so we're going to use the unit circle to find the values of the 6 trig functions at t equals pi over 2. So the first thing that I always do is I draw in pi over 2 in standard form. Hopefully you're recognizing by now that that is a 90-degree angle. And that corresponds to the point 0, 1. So then I am going to write down my 6 trig functions: sine of t, cosine of t, tangent of t, and my 3 reciprocal functions: cosecant of t, secant of t, and cotangent of t. Okay, so my sine of t is always my y value, so it's 1. My cosine of t is always on the unit circle, is always my x value, that's 0. My tangent, sine over cosine, 1 over 0. 1 over 0 is undefined. So we say that the tangent of t is undefined. Next, we're going to find our reciprocals. The reciprocal of the sine is the cosecant. The reciprocal of 1 is 1. The reciprocal of the cosine is the secant. The reciprocal of 0 is undefined. So we say the secant is undefined. This is interesting. Even though our tangent was undefined, our cotangent is 0 over 1, which is 0. Okay, so anytime you are dealing with an undefined answer for one of your trig functions, its reciprocal is going to be 0. Okay, so that's an important thing to think about. Okay, on your own, pause the video and try to find the values of the trig functions at t equals pi. You're looking for the 6 trig functions, like the example previous. So here I put pi in standard position. I found that corresponded to the point -1, 0. I looked for my 6 trig values. Okay, so I'll give you a few seconds to look at that. If you need to pause the video while you check these, that's fine. And please move on to watch the second part for the rest of these notes.